In today's show, we're talking Atlanta Hawks with the host of the Locked On Hawks podcast. What about Trae and DeJounte? How does it work? He's going to, hopefully, give us some answers. Michael Bolton, did I say his name? His name's Brad Rowland. Anyway, this guy's name is Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com and at Yahoo Sports Australia. And you can find me on Twitter, as always, at redrock_bball and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Thank you for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free and we are available on all platforms. We're here to talk Atlanta Hawks. There's a lot to talk about with this squad. So, Warnie,
let's get it on, Gilly.
All right, let's bring him in again for maybe the sixth year in a row. Pretty sure it is the sixth year in a row. It is Brad Rowland of Locked On Hawks. Brad, welcome back.
It's my honor to be here, sir. I'm happy to do it. I think it is 6 years in a row. I know we were sort of founding members of this Locked On Podcast Network, so here we are.
Yep, here we are. It might even be 7, to be honest, because I know we've been with the network 7 years, but this might be the 7th off season that we've done. So here we are. We're here to talk Hawks, and this is, like every team is every year, like markedly different. And maybe it is a little bit more different than some other teams, because when I go through the lists of people who are coming and going onto this team, there's a lot of names. In fact, I couldn't fit them all on one screen. DeJounte Murray's in this. Two Holidays, Justin and Aaron, Mo Harkless. And then there's some guys not maybe as interesting. Trent Forrest, Frank Kaminsky, 2 draft picks, AJ Griffin and Tyrese Martin as well. I don't know. Should we tackle it straight away? The DeJounte Murray and Trae Young stuff, because DeJounte's at the top of this list. Let's do it now. DeJounte Murray comes in. He'll start next to Trae Young. DeJounte Murray was great in fantasy last year. People knew that he took a huge step forward. But, Brad, I am expecting a decent-sized step back from him last season. And when I was on your show a couple of weeks ago, we talked about how Trae and DeJounte were both top 4 in assists, and you just cannot have two guys on the same team with that volume. So, yeah, who takes the biggest step back?
Yeah, I think it's probably going to be Murray of the two of them, just out of necessity. Trae, I think they know that Trae is still the sun, moon, and stars. I think he's going to have the ball in his hands all the time. He's the more efficient guy. He's the better shooter, etc. He's the better passer. I mean, he's just kind of better across the board offensively. So I think that he is probably going to be stable. I think his numbers will probably come down a little bit, as you sort of allude to there. You have to fill in some usage for Murray, but I think it's more other guys that might lose more usage to Murray than Trae. I think if you're the Hawks, you don't want Trae taking a huge step back, because he's still your best player by a wide margin.
The thing that people that play fantasy, they tend to have short memories, or just last season. Like DeJounte Murray's done this for exactly one season. He's never been this high assist guy in the past. He's never been that efficient guy in the past. He'd never had a steal season like he had last season, and he definitely didn't have a usage season like last season. He jumped about 6 usage percentage points last season. So he has played in a low usage role plenty of times when DeMar DeRozan was there literally just a season ago. And it's not like that he is this guy that's had this track record of having, running everything, massive assists, massive usage, because he just hasn't. He did it for 1 year, basically out of necessity. And I do think that, he will fall back somewhat there, and maybe a pretty sizable amount. But you are right. We're going to talk about some of the other guys in that lineup that he will still get his shots for sure. He's not going to fade into obscurity, but it's the other guys who will cop a little bit of hurt there. In terms of the guys leaving, Danilo Gallinari is gone, part of that DeJounte Murray deal. Kevin Huerter went to Sacramento. Delon Wright's gone. Lou Williams, not signed anywhere. Gorgie Dieng and Timothé Luwawu-Cabarrot, who some may say inexplicably started a ton of games for this team last season. Which absence there hurts the most?
I think it's probably Huerter. He's the best player of that group. Gallo for a long time had a great career and is still a productive guy, but some of his weaknesses are getting more magnified as he ages, especially defensively. He's kind of hard to have out there sometimes. They'll definitely miss him too. I think those two guys are sort of in a tier on their own. But Huerter, just the way that he fits so well offensively on this roster, didn't need the ball to be successful. Great shooter, etc. Pretty good passer, underrated playmaker. And I think the Hawks don't have a ton of that right now, just like those kind of plug and play shooting, floor spacing wings. So I think he would be the guy that I would circle, but they're going to miss Gallo. They're going to miss DeLon Wright as well. DeLon Wright just kind of does all the little stuff. I love DeLon Wright, honestly. He's one of those guys that you just can't help but like if you watch him every day. So they have some guys that they'll certainly miss, but I think Herter's probably number one on that list.
Obviously, DeJounte Murray is going to be the backup point guard on this team, but to me, DeLon Wright is significantly better than Aaron Holiday. And I would argue, maybe some people would disagree, I think he's a better player than Justin Holiday as well. So it is a loss. Like, DeLon Wright's just a guy that, when he's on the court, I just think good things happen. And whatever role it is, like, do you need to ramp him up and do something? The only time he really failed was like that half a season in Dallas. And every other place that he's been really good. And I think that, that maybe it's not that important because Murray's there, but he is an important player, and he will be missed at times. And I know there were some Hawks fans that weren't big fans of DeLon, but I think he's a decently sized loss. Now, in terms of injuries, Brad, the only one that I'm aware of heading into the season that we need to be concerned about is Bogdan Bogdanovic, who suffered that knee injury maybe a year or 2 years ago and sort of hasn't quite been right with it and had another surgery in the off-season. What's the prognosis for him for training camp?
Yeah, that is certainly the number one injury concern. The only official injury stuff the Hawks have put out was actually on the same day. It was Bogdanovic and Jalen Johnson, who ended up missing Summer League. But that was one where there was kind of a no big deal aspect to that one for the most part. With Bogdanovic, he's, the last couple of seasons, while he's gotten back on the floor, he's battled some injuries and also basically was wearing down to the point where he had to have something done in both of the last two off seasons. And they've said that they expect him to, quote, make a full recovery in advance of the regular season. But notice they didn't say training camp. They're kind of keeping their options open there. I have my guard up on Bogdanovic. I think eventually he'll be a good factor for this team, and they badly need him, by the way, for his shooting in particular. But if he missed time, it would not stun me. We're still far enough away now where we're not really sure. But missing Eurobasket, like he's not close right now. I don't think. I think he's going to be a sort of a game time decision when it comes to the opener.
Yeah, that's what I think. I think maybe you're looking at maybe the start of November, last week of October. So maybe he misses the first week or is at least limited there. And you're right, he is important because while we can do staggering, but the second unit, the guys that we're going to project for that second unit, there's no real usage guys or guys that you want to really run things, and that's his role. And I don't really trust, if Bogdanovic is out, for Nate McMillan to get super creative in staggering guys, because in the past, Brad, Nate hasn't really shown creativity with his rotations.
No, he's not. He's not the most innovative guy. He's definitely gets the Doc Rivers. We want to throw out the second unit in full kind of stuff. And I think the Murray presence will kind of force him to stagger at least Trey and Murray, but he's not. To your point there, he's not the most innovative guy, and he's kind of rigid in the way that he approaches first unit, second unit, and is not really sort of adaptable in the way that you might want him to be.
Yeah, that is true. And before we get on to talking more about the Hawks, I've got to talk about Bet Online. Brad, you're there covering the Hawks. Are you a Atlanta Falcons fan?
I am sadly an Atlanta Falcons fan, yes.
All right, so how excited are you for a season of Marcus Mariota and Desmond Ridder as the quarterbacks for the Falcons?
Not that excited. I'm ready for football to come back, and Desmond Ridder might be good. Hopefully, Ritter's good, and they won't have to worry about it anymore. So we'll see. But I think I'm rooting for losses this year more than anything.
He might be good. I reckon he might be okay. But if you want to have a look at the Falcons, who've got a preseason game coming up this weekend against the Jets, BetOnline.net is obviously the fastest and the easiest way for you to check in on all your betting needs. In fact, I just checked in on it, and they are 1-point favorites against the Jets over this weekend. You can find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, which the Atlanta Braves, maybe you want to have a look at those odds over there, Brad. NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information and live in-game betting scores and podcasts. They've got you covered. So head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action that is happening today. BetOnline is where the game starts. Let's have a look at your projected starting five, and I don't think anybody would argue with this, Brad. There's no argument, really. Let's go through it. Trey, DeJounte, DeAndre Hunter, John Collins, and Clint Capella. I guess the only other thing there that could be a real long shot is Onyeka Okongwu over Clint Capella, but I feel like there's maybe a 2% chance of that happening.
Yeah, I would say probably even lower than that at the beginning of the season. I think it would take a Capella injury for Okongwu to start. Maybe during the season, something like that happens, if Capella just shows some age or whatever, but I will be stunned if there are no injuries, if this is not the starting line.
Are we going to have the now annual tradition of Clint Capella having Achilles soreness in the preseason?
We'll see. I mean, by all accounts, he was okay to have his normal summer activity. So that would be a good sign. Last year, he was kind of banked up at the end of the season by all accounts. So they kind of did a pretty good job keeping that under wraps. But I have not heard anything about him being limited. Now, at the same time, he's had the Achilles stuff for 3+ years on and off now. So it shouldn't surprise anyone if he is a little bit slow in training camp. But I have heard good things. We'll see.
It ended his season when he was traded to the Hawks, where he didn't play. And then the 2 pre-seasons after that, he didn't play and was limited due to Achilles soreness. And then it didn't really impact him during the season, which was pretty weird for that Achilles issue, which, of course, can turn into something pretty significantly serious. But yeah, Young, Murray, Hunter, Collins, Capella. I think when you look at that grouping there, anyone, and we're going to talk about DeAndre Hunter a little bit later, if you're expecting a DeAndre Hunter breakout in that group, it's going to be pretty hard for him to touch the ball.
Yeah. I think they definitely have high hopes for him. The organization still buys DeAndre Hunter, but in terms of usage, in terms of prominence, I guess the theory would be that he just becomes the clear number 3 option, and maybe Collins takes a step back if you want to buy in on Hunter. But yeah, I think there's probably to be effective, his small usage role might be his best bet.
I guess if you want the offense to be worse, you'd give Hunter those touches over John Collins. If that's what you're looking to do, you could do that. But the bench rotations where things become a bit more interesting. We've got 2 Holidays in there, although DeJounte Murray will handle that backup role. But Aaron's probably that 10th man in there. You got Bogdanovic, Justin Holiday, Jalen Johnson, and Onyeka Okongwu. Justin Holiday couldn't be less excited. Aaron Holiday is no good. Okongwu, he was really, really impactful for fantasy last year, even coming off the bench or starting. He only played 21 minutes a night, I think, last season, or under 21 minutes a night, yet was still able to be a top 140 player. And there are plenty of people hoping for a big breakout for him. Do we look at 21 minutes a night for Okongwu, or is this a 24-minute platoon perhaps with Capella? Has he shown enough to be able to be like that relevant for Nate McMillan?
I think that when Capella is healthy and in there, you'll probably see Okongwu have about that 20 to 22 minute range. There might be some nights I think that they're probably open to the fact that maybe in certain matchups, or if Okongwu was playing well and Capella isn't, maybe a flip-flop there. I still think that Capella is the 1A to 1B for Okongwu, to the point where I'm going to lean on Capella in terms of my expectations to play more, or at least play as much as he did last year. But, with the injury stuff that we just hit on, Capella was pretty durable last year, played 74 games. That might come down a touch, you would imagine. If I had to guess over or under 74, I'd take the under. So I think it might be more of a playing time opening up like that. But I think when they're both healthy, I would probably guess something like the 26-22 split, something like that.
Yeah, that's actually, I've actually got it exactly at 26-22 for this upcoming season, which puts Okongwu towards the back end of fantasy. And if Capella is out, his value rises. Capella comes back, his value drops. And yeah, that's going to limit him overall. I really like Okongwu. I thought they should have been looking to get value out of a Capella trade and just slot Okongwu in, but they haven't done that. But Capella also feels like he's 32 years of age, but he just turned 28. Like, he's not actually that old. And I'm sure I'm not alone in thinking that he's way older than he actually is. At 28, he's like smack bang right in the middle of his prime. Like, he's not that old. While Okongwu is like 20? We're not even 22 yet. So yeah, in a year or two, maybe that switch happens. The other guy there that we just didn't see at all really last season is Jalen Johnson. Put up some big summer league numbers. He's got a great fantasy skill set, maybe some 3-point shooting, block, steals, rebounds. Probably just sliding into the Danilo Gallinari role. Do you think he gets that straight off, or Nate McMillan? We know there is some stubbornness there, that maybe he goes with Mo Harkless in that role instead.
I have a little bit of fear about that. McMillan does like to lean on his veterans. Last year it was TLC. The year before that it was Solomon Hill. Nate just seems to like those plug and play combo forwards who can play a little defense.
That is exactly what Mo Harkless is as well.
Exactly. So, I mean, obviously, Hawks fans are clamoring for Jalen Johnson. I'd love to see Jalen Johnson. I think they will probably give him a chance. I would hope they were give him a chance after drafting in the first round, but nothing is assured there. And even if he does play, I think he will definitely play less than Gallo. Like, they kind of felt forced in a good way to get Gallo on the floor. I think Gallo averaged like 25 minutes a game last year. Even if Johnson's in that role, it's going to be more of like a 15-minute a game role, I'd imagine. I think Collins is going to play more. They might use Hunter at the 4 sometimes, etc. But it's going to be a smaller role than Gallinari had, regardless.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely spot on. And while we can look at Johnson and Okongwu as maybe the front court of the future, I don't think we should be going, well, we'll just wait until John Collins gets traded because they're going to throw Jalen Johnson. We've been hearing John Collins trades for as long as we've been hearing, I don't know, any player that's been, Miles Turner, like, I don't know which one's battling for longest name in trade rumor cycles, because it's been out there for so long and just never happened. And if it does, Johnson's not coming in and playing 32 minutes anymore because Mo Harkless, or maybe he'll resurrect Solomon Hill and bring him back to be the starter. So while we like Johnson, it's still probably a year or maybe 2 years away from being super relevant. In terms of young guys on this squad, we've talked to Kong, we've talked Johnson. Let's talk about the first round pick, AJ Griffin, who I thought probably should have been a top 10 draft pick in this draft, but there were injury concerns, and then it didn't really assure me when he fell to 16, and then he didn't play in summer league, and the Hawks are like, oh, it's fine, there's nothing wrong, but you got to be a little bit concerned, surely.
Yeah, I was in Vegas. They were very consistent on message about how they weren't worried about it long term, and it was a new thing. It wasn't like it was a recurrence of other issues. Like he's had lots of like leg issues, but it wasn't the same thing. So I'm not sure if that's better or worse. It wasn't the same thing, but we'll see. For me, it's more the age and the inexperience, and also just like McMillan's proclivities more than anything else. I think that Griffin's still 18 as we record this. He's definitely more on the raw side. I was with you. I had him in my top 10 or 12 in this year's draft, and he sort of fell in their laps, kind of in the same way that Johnson did last year. But I think that it might take an injury or two to get Griffin regular playing time, just because of the avoidance of rookies for McMillan, and also his defense is going to be pretty bad early. I think we could probably agree on that.
Yep.
But the shooting is special potentially, so that's definitely going to be his calling card early on.
The Hawks have done well with guys sliding. Like I had John Collins higher in his draft. He slid. He performed well. I had Jalen Johnson higher, and he slid, and I think he's going to be okay, even though he only played 5 minutes a game. I had AJ Griffin higher. I had Onyeka Okongwu higher than 6 as well, and the Hawks ended up with him, and I think he's been pretty good in that role. We just haven't seen him push into that starters role yet. So we'll see with Griffin. I still like him longer term for fantasy, but again, Johnson played 5 minutes a game last season, and if Griffin plays more than 10, I reckon I'd be pretty surprised, or there'd have to be quite a few injuries, or he'd have to just be unbelievable. So I just don't think we should be counting too much on him, and even less so on Tyrese Martin, at pick number 51, I believe it was, in the NBA draft. We'd not expect, if Nate McMillan's not excited about rookies, he's not going to be really pumping up the tires of a 51st overall pick.
They do like Martin. They signed him to that full contract, but yeah, I'm with you. I think maybe I can see Hawks fans losing their minds about Martin playing ahead of Griffin at some point this year. That would not stun me, just given what the organization values and what the coaching staff values. But yeah, neither guy expected to be prominently involved, I would imagine. The one caveat being, if Bogdanovich does have lingering stuff, they might just have to have Griffin shooting out there at some point.
Yeah, that's true. And because you've lost Kevin Huerter as well, there is that's that bench. Justin Holiday's not a bad shooter, but he's low volume. Aaron Holiday's theoretically a good shooter, but he's not. And Jalen Johnson's not going to be a volume shooter or even a good shooter probably at this point. We've talked about the DeJounte Murray side of things with his addition. What about Trae Young? Now, Trae Young was great last season, but I think we have to cast our mind back 2 seasons, that when the Hawks brought in Gallinari, when they brought in Bogdanovich, Trae did drop off in some of his production. A lot of it was efficiency issues, but he did only average, I think, 25 points in that season, whereas last season he was back right up at, 28 with almost 10 assists with that same roster. So it just took him a little bit of an adjustment, I think is fair. He averaged 25 and 9 in 34 minutes with a usage of 32. So he dropped that from 36 to 32 when Bogdanovich and Gallinari arrived, pushed it back to 34 last season. I expect it sort of to come back as he adjusts with DeJounte there, maybe to 32, 33 range. But as we said earlier, we expect DeJounte to lose it a little bit. But it's not out of the realms of possibility that Trae does fall back somewhat in that adjustment period.
I can see that for sure. And I think that the playing time is interesting in that this is kind of a roster that's set up to lean on their starters pretty heavily. They have less depth than they had previously, but the one caveat might be Trae, just because they have Murray on the roster. But the big thing for me is the counting stats are going to be there, but the efficiency was a career best almost across the board last year. 2-point shooting, 3-point shooting, effective field goal percentage, all the free throw percentage. The free throw attempts went down a little bit because of the rule changes and whatever else happened there, but he basically adjusted to that. And I think I'd probably take the under on his counting stats. I think it was 28 and almost 10 last year, just because of Murray's presence and just maybe a little bit of a downturn in efficiency. I would lean under what he did last year, but I would also take probably the over on 25 points where he was 2 years ago. So maybe somewhere in that 27 point a game range, still probably that 9 assist range, because he just kind of he's so good at racking up assists that I can't imagine him falling too far there. But the big swing is probably his efficiency.
You're reading my mind, because I've got him projected at 27 points and 9 assists, coming down from 28.5 and 10 where he was last season. And towards the end of last, we talk about his efficiency. His efficiency just pushed up and up as the season went on, and he was hitting 53% of his twos. The thing is that we look at him as a great 3-point shooter, and he is, because of the difficulty of shots and how many he's taking. But last season he shot 38% from 3. He'd never been over 36 prior to that. He'd never been a great high percentage guy. So it's he could easily fall back from 38 to 35, and it wouldn't be anything to do with Murray. It just might be variance, because again, he's done that we think of him as this unbelievable 3-point shooter, but he's actually had one season of being really as a good 3-point shooting or 3-point efficiency player. So that's something that I think, again, gets a little bit lost when we consider, hey, the best 3-point shooter. Trey's amazing. He just didn't hit him at that rate prior to last season.
Yeah, maybe the trade-off is that he has more catch and shoots with Murray. Maybe he's playing off the ball a little bit more, and that helps to boost because, it's small sample size every year, but he's really been good on those catch and shoot opportunities, 40+% on those. So maybe that's the trade-off of like, maybe he makes a few less off the dribble and a few more catch and shoots and kind of levels off. But I'm with you. I think his actual percentages don't line up to his actual shooting talent because he takes so many tough shots. I mean, that's part of the logistics here. He's taking 35-footers all the time and contested step backs and all that stuff. It's hard to maintain like high-end efficiency on those shots.
It absolutely is. Now, I've got this question here, which now that I look at it, I don't think I've worded it very well, but I've written basically, is DeAndre Hunter who he is? Like, is this just who he is, basically? We talked about already trying to get usage. He's a guy that, and this happens so often, like we saw his numbers coming out of college and go, he's this really good defender, but there's no defensive stats because that's the way that Virginia plays. And then he came to the NBA and he gets no defensive stats. And it's just, basically is who he is. And he had a hot streak of about 10 games in 2020, 2021 at the start of the year where his usage and efficiency blew up. Then he got hurt and he came back and he struggled and he was pretty poor last season. Couldn't rebound, doesn't get assists, doesn't get defensive stats. I know they're saying the organization's really high on him still, but like, where does he improve from here? Like, what is he? I look at him and I see what he does and the players around him, and I just don't know where it goes from here.
Yeah, it's all fair. I mean, I've gotten some pushback locally for just kind of pointing out that he wasn't very good last year, and I've always kind of liked him. Like he was in my top 5 in that draft, and but logistically last year, like he just wasn't that good. And the rebounding is the one that's like just kind of inexplicable to me because he's all of 6'7", 6'8", and he's stocky. He's got a good build, and he was rebounding at the level of a point guard last year on the percentages, and it was just brutal. But I think that you're looking for, if you're the Hawks, kind of the counting stats from 2 years ago. And you mentioned it was a very small sample size, but he averaged like 15 and 5 with 2 assists. Like that would be a notable uptick, which doesn't sound like anything crazy, but if you can get that out of him, that would be nice. The defensive stats are probably never going to come. He's not, I think he's a good defender in a lot of ways, but not an active one. He's not going to be a deflections guy. And they also use him in that one-on-one role a lot where they don't really want him being a playmaker off the ball. He's kind of the on-ball guy. So, I mean, the one positive from last year was 3-point shooting. He shot 38%. That was a career best by a lot. If you could just kind of channel that and improve his 2-point shooting back to a reasonable level, I think if his efficiency will be fine. I'm not sure I'm forecasting a huge leap in the way that maybe some are, but I think that he'll also probably he should have his best season through 4 years. Year 2 was such a small sample size that like it's kind of unrealistic because he was so efficient and so productive. But I do kind of buy him getting better. But your point's not wrong. Like it might just be incremental. Like you're just hoping for him to improve a little bit across the board rather than like one breakout area.
He rebounded, I think, fewer rebounds than Trae Young last season.
It was bad. It was bad.
Like as a 6'7" guy, and you're getting 1 assist a game, 0.7 steals, and 0.4 blocks. Like they're just horrendous numbers. And while he shot well on threes, he doesn't take any. Like he took under 4 per game, like 3.5 threes a game. If you're hitting 39% of it, you need to be getting 7 of those up. Like you need to be getting more of those shots up. Like he hit under 1.5 threes per game. And that year, his second season when he only played the 23 games, it came on 58% shooting from 2. Now, he was down at 47 last season, which is really low. I expect that to jump up somewhat, but 58 is an unsustainable number, I think, for a guy that's not a big man or not like just an absolutely elite finisher, which he isn't. So that's why I look at those numbers and go, like, maybe his 3-point shooting sticks at 38. That's totally possible, but I don't think that level of 2-point shooting is going to be realistic. So somewhere in the middle, the twos push up a little bit and he gets okay, but like the usage, I'm just not expecting it to be there. Again, DeJounte comes in. He's a higher usage player than Kevin Huerter, and Hunter's probably going to be one of the guys who suffers there. So I'm not expecting much in terms of a breakout. But do you have a breakout candidate for me, Brad? Who might be a breakout guy this year?
Yeah, it's kind of tough in terms of like, especially numbers wise. Hunter in theory would be the guy who you would say would line up to that because he's top 5 pick, year 4, kind of a rough year last year, and everybody else is kind of established. Trey and DeJounte had great years last year. Capella's not going to change his game. Collins might play more minutes this year, but the role is still kind of unclear. Like I'm still a John Collins guy, but he's still playing next to a traditional center all the time. And it's a very interesting situation. There really isn't like an obvious breakout candidate. I think that they're hoping it's going to be Hunter, but it might be in a way that's like more wins and loss based than like actual numbers based. I think he can be a lot more valuable as a breakout player in a small usage role offensively that's more efficient, more of just a role player role than like relying on his pull up twos, that kind of stuff. But in terms of like a traditional, like especially fantasy breakout, I don't think there is one. I mean, maybe I'm crazy, but I don't really see one. I guess the only path would be if Okongwu just really got the chance. Like if Capella missed 6 weeks and Okongwu was starting and playing 35 minutes a game, like he could probably do it, but short of that, I don't really see it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that Okongwu is the guy that everyone would want to hear is the breakout guy, but as we've detailed, we don't see without injuries, which we can't predict. Like he's not getting more than 24 a night to do that. Hunter, I don't think, has got that opportunity. Jalen Johnson's not going to play enough. DeJounte probably and Trey take a step back, so it's really hard to see who that guy is. So. Regression candidate, I'll throw it out there. I think DeJounte Murray's going to drop off quite a bit, but do you see anyone else aside from DeJounte who's going to lose some value from what they did last season?
Yeah, I mean, the only natural guys would be the older guys, being Capella and Bogdanovich. Bogdanovich for injury reasons. Yeah. Whenever he plays, he's been effective in Atlanta, but between the knee and age and all that stuff, maybe he falls off a little bit. And just Capella for the if he plays less minutes, and obviously he has the drawbacks already with free throw shooting, etc. But I think his counting stats could come down if he just plays less. Other than that, like guys who have established role, I think Murray is the very obvious one in terms of like he's not going to replicate what he averaged last year. That's the one I would certainly circle. But the other two that I always keep an eye on are Bogdanovich and Capella.
I think we know the answer to this, but is this team better than last season?
Yes, I think they are. I think it might be overstated in some circles because you kind of just think, they're doing is trading Gallinari for DeJounte Murray, and that might overstate how good they are, if that makes sense. Like I'm hearing a lot of that locally, like, well, they've added this all-star point guard. I'm like, well, yes, they are better. They're more talented now than they've ever been. Murray's the best player that Trace played with, but the depth is less. So I think it might be a little bit closer than people think in terms of like true talent, true ability level, true performance level, but I think they are better.
What do you make of all of the DeJounte Murray Pro-Am run clips of bouncing balls off people's heads and abusing people? What do you make of this? I don't even know what's going on with him. What do you make of this?
It's a little weird. I mean, honestly, people ask me this all the time now, which is bizarre in itself. But I don't know him that well. Like he just got here. I've been in one press conference with him. He was fine there. Like I've asked around about him in San Antonio, people that I trust, and nobody seems to think he's like a problem. But it's been a little bit of a weird cycle. I mean, the Paolo thing especially has been very bizarre to the point where like a national newsbreaker is breaking when the first Hawks Magic game is.
Chris Haynes,
and it's like this. I mean, and I don't blame Chris Haynes. It was just funny. I was like, wait, Hawks Magic's not like a big game for people. No. And then I was like, oh yeah, it's because of. So yeah, it's all. From what I understand, nobody's worried about DeJounte like suddenly just being this evil villain now, but it's a little bit strange for sure.
It's definitely come out of nowhere. And people go, it's because he's away from Pop now. This is who he is. But still, like you don't see clips of NBA players bouncing balls off multiple people's heads in like casual runs. Like you just don't see those clips come out and him just piffing balls at guys. It's just weird. And I don't think it's going to have any impact during the season. But it's weird. Who's the most likely player to be traded on this roster? Is it Johnny Collins again for the 20th straight year?
I think it has to be just because they've kind of signaled that they're at least willing to trade him. So he's the one guy that I without even asking anyone, I can tell you is like at least available to be traded. I think eventually they're going to have to choose between Capella and Okongwu, which probably means Capella out the door. But by all accounts, like Trey loves Capella, Nate loves Capella, like, and I get it. Like he's a really valuable player. So that's the other one that's kind of a sleeper is like maybe that they just like feel like compelled to just clear the decks for Okongwu at some point. But I think Collins is in his own tier for now in terms of like who I'd pick for that.
Yeah, well, I suppose when you've got the opportunity to trade Capella so you can get Frank Kaminsky into the rotation, that's something you always got to consider that. All right, it's time for fun, Brad. It's time for a quiz. Now, you'd be aware of the website Basketball Index. They have a bunch of different advanced metrics, and the three that I'm asking the hosts about are three-point shooting talent, playmaking talent, and finishing talent. Because I want to see if their just idea of the team matches up with these metrics. Now, three-point shooting talent is not just who has the best three-point percentage. It's based on difficulty of shots, volume of shots, self-created versus catch and shoot, the importance of those shots, late in shot clocks, all that sort of stuff. Playmaking is not the most assists. It's like who's getting guys open, the volume of passes, the difficulty of passes, the creativity of passes, the versatility, and then finishing talent. It's not like who grabs putbacks and puts them in, who just catches alley-oops. It's about getting to the rim. It's about finishing at the rim. It's about getting through contact and to try and weigh all that stuff up, because we could just say, well, Capella finishes because he shoots 60%, and it's not as simple as that. So I want to see if your version of this, based on what happened last season, matches up with the metrics. I'm just going to look at them. Do I think they're difficult? Not really. Who do you think's the best graded 3-point shooting talent on this team?
I think it's probably it's either Trae or Bogdanovich. I will say Trae.
It is Trae Young, because again, that difficulty of shot, he upped his percentage last season. All of the self-created, all of the pull-up stuff. If you want someone to hit a three on this team, you're going to go to him. You're not going to go to DeAndre Hunter or even Bogdanovich. I guess he'd be a second option there. Kevin Huerter might have been close as well. What about playmaking? Don't get this wrong, please.
I mean, it has to be Trae, right?
It is. It's definitely Trae. What about this one? What about finishing talent? Who's the best finisher?
I will say John Collins, but I'm not sure the numbers will say that because of the role he's been in. But I think of John Collins as like a truly elite finisher. He's not had the opportunity to do that since Capella got there. But I will say Collins anyway.
It is, in fact, a clean sweep for Trae Young. He graded out with the best finishing.
I'm not surprised by that, I guess, now that I think about it, because like for as small as he is, the craft and the foul drawing and all this, that's reasonable. I get it.
Yeah, the foul drawing is part of that. And last question. Basketball Index has a stat called total offensive load. Basically, it involves things like box creation, assists, potential assists, scoring, usage, all that sort of stuff. Right? We know that Trae Young carries a gigantic amount of responsibility all the way back from college, where he had 38 usage and 48 assist percentage. So he's just running everything. And he's carried that across to the NBA. So we know that he's the best and he carries the offense on this squad. But in terms of in the entire NBA, where would Trae rank in terms of the offensive load that he carries?
You could say first, and it wouldn't surprise me. I will say second.
You should have said first, because he ranked number one. Yeah. He had 62% of the total offense was run through him, according to that metric, again, which takes a couple of things into consideration. I think Doncic was second, and Trae was first there again, which shouldn't surprise anyone, because those guys run what their team does. And that's why we can... Look, Trae can... I highlight this because Trae could step back from first, but he's just so high up in that number. These numbers are still going to be great, and he's got so much scope to be able to lose a little bit of that responsibility and still be awesome. Whereas, someone like DeJounte, who's going to lose a chunk, he wasn't at that absolutely elite level, so he might go from very good to just being good, and that's a bigger sort of drop-off, or more impactful drop-off. Brad, that will cover us off here for the Atlanta Hawks and their season preview. Tell people what is happening over at the old Locked On Hawks podcast.
Yeah, it's busy, even though it's not busy here in August for most people. I just recorded, before I talk to you, my schedule reaction. So 'tis the season for schedule breakdowns, because we have to fill content this time of year. But no, Locked On Hawks podcast, subscribe, rate, review. I'm also a writer over at Diamond Up Rocks on the written side. So I cover the entire league there, Hawks up at Locked On Hawks. And we're doing all this stuff. We're ramping up the season. We're almost there, like 6 weeks away. It's getting close.
We are getting close, and I'm recording this before I've recorded my schedule reaction podcast, but it's releasing after. So you would have heard my thoughts on the NBA schedule yesterday, even though I haven't actually given them yet. In real life, that is the beauty of scheduling and editing. Brad, thanks again for, let's say, 7 years in a row, coming on and doing the Hawks preview with me.
My pleasure, Josh. Happy to do it anytime. I'm a huge listener, huge fan, so thanks for having me.
And that will do it for me today. We are going to have another show tomorrow, a season preview with the Golden State Warriors, unless something goes awry. So we're going to talk Golden State Warriors tomorrow. Don't forget, follow this podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and on the Odyssey app. If you're here on YouTube, thumb it up and leave your comments down below. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.